The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Banks, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. For more information on the Charlotte Ledger or to subscribe to one of our newsletters, go to thecharlotteledger.com. This episode of the Charlotte Ledger Podcast is sponsored by Childcare Search. Finding childcare is more than checking a box. It's peace of mind. For over 40 years, Childcare Search, a service of Childcare Resources Incorporated, has helped families find safe, nurturing, quality childcare options. Their free referral service connects you to licensed programs that fit your family's needs. Visit findchildcarenc.org or call 1-888-600-1685 to talk to a childcare navigator today. Today on the podcast, we're talking to Nick Walker, who is the new director of the Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation Department. He took over the position in February of 2025, so he's been at the job for about 6 months now, and we wanted to check in with him and see how things are going and what his goals are for the county's park system. Prior to joining us here in Charlotte, though, Nick was the parks director in Memphis, Tennessee for 6 years. Now, in Mecklenburg, he oversees more than 290 parks, nature preserves, greenways, and facilities, which are located on more than 22,500 acres. And he leads the department with an over $71 million budget. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you today and, learn about your goals and, what, you think about Mecklenburg County and living here since you've moved here. But I do want to say, I think parks and greenways and public sports facilities are one of the main ways people interact with county government, I would say, on a weekly or maybe a daily basis. So people really care about parks. So all that to say, as you have a very important job. So I'm excited to talk to you about it today. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you to a career in park and recreation?
Sure. It's as my boss and my wife and others have pointed out, I have a very weird resume. I'm not a traditional Parks and Rec guy. That being said, over the last 8 years, I have almost like a reborn Parks and Rec person because like I said, like you mentioned in the intro, I moved here from Memphis where I served as the Park and Rec director for about 6 years. Prior to that, I worked in the mayor's office doing performance management, which is just a fancy way of saying using data to try to make good informed decisions. I've got a background, a graduate degree in computer science, a lot of work on databases with smart meters and other things. But I think, my family jokes with me all the time that I was sort of always born to be a park director. I grew up in the state park system. My dad was a superintendent. He ran a state park in Arkansas. I was an historic preservationist before that. So I spent a lot of time between Boy Scout camp, where I worked for 5 summers, and various park and rec jobs, being a lifeguard, that sort of thing, to coming back as an adult and really getting into it. I came into the park and recreation space in Memphis from the mayor's office to help them try to develop data, to use software and tools to try to get a better sense of a way to quantify and qualify the work that the department was doing. And then when our previous director there left, ironically, to come to North Carolina, the mayor asked me to stay on an interim basis through the first 6 or 7 months of COVID. Worked really hard to build a team and a coalition to get a lot of things done. That's not a unique thing to me, but for a lot of people that were in the park and recreation space in 2020. And at the end of it, they asked me to stay on. And when people ask me, what are some of the best things about being in parks and recreation? I know a lot of people who work in the corporate world, and this isn't a slight to them or anything like that, but a lot of times they have to struggle with the question of why am I doing what I'm doing? I never wake up in the morning and wonder what is it that I'm doing. If it's not the look on my 6-year-old daughter's face when she's excited to go to the park or to the pool or to summer camp, it's the seniors that I see actively thriving in our centers. It's the programs that we put on in the park. It is the Sundown Sound series, going out and seeing people enjoy free live music out in our park facilities. There is a very high job satisfaction and quality to being in the park and recreation space.
So what attracted you to Mecklenburg County in the Charlotte area? How did you end up here?
So this is, I will first of all say that I don't think that it is a difficult sell to get anyone to move to North Carolina or the Charlotte area. Obviously, the quality of education, the quality of life, the access to recreation. There's, outside of California, not a lot of places where you can drive from the beach to a place to ski all within one day. The lakes, the parks, all of it's wonderful from a quality of life standpoint. The sort of more controversial part of that is, and I think it's something that I hope your readers and listeners will find interesting. Mecklenburg County Park System is arguably one of the 10 to 20 best park systems in the U.S. When I talk to my colleagues in the urban park environment, which is really any park system that serves more than 250,000 people, that you're responsible for providing the park and rec system for it. This is a dream job for a lot of people. This is an incredible system with a huge diversity of amenities, programs, people. The level of funding that we receive from the county is incredible. The types of things that we do are incredible. And so to be able to come to an organization that has the history, success, and trajectory that this organization has, it really wasn't much of a sell for me. I tell people all the time, I hadn't applied for a job in Memphis in 6 years, but the second that this one came open, I was very interested in it. I was excited because I believed in the mission, the vision, and the structure of this organization.
Yeah, I moved to Charlotte 3 years ago, and so I can echo everything that you were saying as to, what drew me to Charlotte and why I've stayed here for 3 years. It's just, it's a really exciting place to be in the city that's growing and changing so much on a day-to-day basis, and not, good change all the time, but for the most part, just being in the middle of that is a really cool place to be in. So this is my next question is kind of on a similar vein. So I know you've been in this role for 4 months now, and I'm just kind of curious what your first impressions are of the county and its park system. I know it's been a recent topic of conversation, or maybe not recent, but over the past few years, that the area, maybe needs some more parks and sports fields and swimming pools. And I'm curious if that's been a part of your observations, or just generally, what do you think about Mecklenburg County's park systems?
I think that, what I said earlier about this being an incredible system is true. And I think that the staff and the team here have done a remarkable job of trying to keep up with the, let's just face it, insane growth that this area has had. It's very fascinating because, I guess they're referred to as unicorns. But when you talk to people that grew up in Charlotte, that have spent 30, 40 years here, how different a town this was or is from what it was in the 80s and 90s. You hear that, the bones were there, but none of the people were here. And so with that in mind, I think any park system would struggle to keep up with the necessary growth of adding parks and adding greenways and adding community centers and adding playgrounds and all of those things. That being said, I also think that the team here has done a remarkable job. I think that I am joining a long line of really dedicated park professionals, many of whom are still working here, and I'm fortunate to call colleagues who have that same drive to make, we're in Park and Rec, we're called a quality of life division. It's usually, libraries, parks, the arts and cultural part of municipal government are often referred to as the quality of life. And I think that is such an important thing because a lot of times jobs or education or family draws people to an area. But what keeps them is that quality of life. And again, I think all the people that I work with are really dedicated on making sure that quality of life remains a good one. But to your point about the need for more things, I'm coming here at a fun time as we set about redoing our master plan. And part of the master planning process, for those of you who are not either city planning or department planning walks out there, is that it is sort of broken into multiple sections. And one of those is doing a needs assessment where you look at the amenities and parks and things like that you have. The other is, and comparing that to what you actually need. The other is looking at your structural and operational setup and whether or not it's adequate, your funding model. and then doing a community engagement to say, hey, here's what we see. Is this what you think? And you do it broad and diverse enough. They call it statistically valid, where you make sure that the sample you get of feedback from the community aligns socioeconomically, politically, racially, sexually, et cetera, with your population. And when you get those numbers, they sort of tell you, are we doing what we need to be doing? What should we be focusing on? And they underwent that process a little over 5 years ago and have been working off a master plan to accomplish a lot of those goals. 85 projects were identified as a part of that, and we're a little over 50 of those have been completed, which means that it's time for us to go get some more stuff. So we're going to go out and we're going to listen to the feedback, and we're going to look at the areas where we've acquired lands and we've developed things and say, what do we need to do going forward? And so I think, to me, that'll be a good measure of where we are, is when I hear that from a large sample of the population. From my eyeballs and ears, yeah, I think we're doing great. But I want to get it from a cross sample of the community, from, all the way from Mint Hill all the way up to Davidson, and inside the loop of the core of the city, and that what I think sort of jives with what the community thinks.
I know the master plan, a really big document. I think you said, 85 projects. Was that the number that you've identified, and you've done 50 of them? Without getting too in the weeds, can you talk about a few of those projects, or what are some of the greater needs that you've, seen or heard from so far from residents that they want to see reflected in their park system?
I think that it's all over the board. I mean, that is when you talk about a large park system that serves such a broad group of people. I mean, 1.2 million people. That's a lot of people spread out over 500 square miles. And so what you see is themes, which is, I want to have access to a greenway. Greenways are incredible. And I will say that we have one of the most amazing greenway systems in the U.S. When I was in Memphis, we were struggling to work on completing a 26-mile greenway that had been under construction for more than 10 years. In Mecklenburg County, we have more than 90 miles of greenway already constructed, and several dozen more already under construction to keep going, and many more funded through the next 5 years to extend that. So that's great. I also see where we have gone out and acquired lands in areas that we call gap areas to build parks. So those are two of the more, sort of broad topics and general things that people are looking for. They want parks that they can either walk to or are within a 5 to 10 minute drive of their home. They want more sports. I mean, we have such a young population in Mecklenburg County, and it's not just competition turf fields with lights and all those things. It is just access to a ball field. It is, and it's not just access to ball fields in the ones that we traditionally think about. I hear about things like cricket and disc golf pretty regularly, which are, again, new concepts to me. I see a need for pickleball courts, and I see a need for pools and recreation centers. It's across the board. Our needs are always going to exceed our ability to build all the things, which is why we have to prioritize and why master plans really help. But that being said, I think we're starting from a really good place.
Yeah, kind of like what you were saying, with the needs being all over the place, someone who doesn't have children, may not prioritize sports fields, or if you don't own a bike, you don't necessarily need trails that you can bike on. So I imagine trying to find that balance is probably a battle that you have to fight every day. And I know I've gone to a couple of park and rec commission meetings, and you all talk about your budgeting and things like that. And so I know when you're planning projects, you kind of have to look 3 to 5 years, sometimes even further into advance. So the things that you're planning now are not really going to come into fruition until years down the line. So I know it's kind of hard to talk about short-term goals, but I'm curious if we could, if you could maybe share some of your goals, some of your vision that you have in your role as director of the Parks Department, short-term and long-term.
Yeah, I think, to me, some of the big, a lot of mine were personal. It is get to know the system, get to know the people that day in and day out do the work. Because as a director, I'm reminded one of the best bosses I've had was a former military guy. And so a lot of his analogies and stories were always, sort of military based. But he said, really, as a leader, your job is three things. It's to set direction, it's to advocate for resources, and it's to hold people accountable. And in order to do all of those things as a park director, I really need to go out and see the work that the people are doing and get a sense of what is it that they need in order to be able to do their jobs. And again, the good news is I'm starting from a place not of scarcity, certainly not of, enormous over resources, but we're not starting from a place where we've got to get to a baseline level. But one of the things that the manager's office talked with me about when I got hired, and it's something I hear on a regular basis, is that we want to be one of the best communities in the United States to live in. And in order to do that, we have to figure out a way to strategically invest in ourselves. And one of those ways is through park and recreation. So educating people on what good looks like and what great looks like and what it takes to get there, that's part of my goals. And it's really something that I've tried to do without sounding too professorial or anything like that. I want to make sure that people have a sense of what we need in order to be able to do our jobs effectively. And, so far, 100 days in or so, I feel like there is a receptiveness on the part of our elected officials and the people in the community that they just want to see the work get done. And so if you help them understand how to do the work, they will do whatever it takes to help you get it done.
We'll be right back to the conversation, but first, just wanted to pop in here with a reminder that this episode of the Charlotte Ledger podcast is presented by Childcare Search, Charlotte's trusted childcare guidance for families. I'm curious too, just, with your experience in Memphis and coming into Mecklenburg County with fresh perspective, fresh eyes, is there anything specifically that you learned, during your 6 years in Memphis that could potentially be applied or that you could see working in Charlotte and in Mecklenburg County?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing that it took me time to do, and I think what I'm really grateful for, is that you have to balance patience with impatience. And what I mean by that is when you talked earlier about the budgetary process and how long construction projects take and those sorts of things, you have to take the time to get those things right. But the things that it's important for you to not wait on, the need for programming for our youth, particularly opportunity youth and children who are in not the best financial or stable-wise situation, to make sure that we're providing resources for them, that's huge. We've got to always be mindful and intentional. And that's something that, again, socioeconomically, Charlotte is very different from Memphis. Mecklenburg County is very different from Memphis. And so the same solutions that I used in Memphis don't necessarily work here. But what is important in both places, and what I will always strive for, is equity. And explaining to people the difference between equity and equality is sometimes difficult until you see it in practice and in person. And so to me, I think that's the biggest thing, is that in Memphis, I was constantly advocating for resources and fighting to get things done. And we got a lot of stuff done. I think with some of the advantages that we have here, I won't have to fight as hard, which means that I'll have to fight broader. And I'll need to look for more opportunities to balance those things, because it will be a different type of challenge, but it's still a challenge.
And you've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious too, is there anything coming down the pipeline, maybe a project that you're really excited about or you're, happy to see coming to Mecklenburg?
There's two of them that are coming right up. We're beginning design work on them right now, which is the design and build of a new Tuckasegee Community Center and a new Albemarle Road Community Center. And in both cases, it is an opportunity to take aging facilities. For some of your readers or listeners who might not be aware, in 1993, the city and county park departments merged, and which is why Mecklenburg County operates so many properties within the city of Charlotte, as opposed to there being a Charlotte Parks Department. And with that came a lot of aging infrastructure of things that were built in the 60s and 70s that it has taken a while to get around to doing some things on. Fortunately, the county has invested heavily in reinvestment into these areas, and deferred maintenance, or whatever term you want to use, has chosen to go about and rebuild a lot of these property, including these next two. And by doing that, it allows us to go into areas where we can, again, show the community that we're investing in our people by investing in our neighborhoods. And both of those, to me, particularly new buildings are cool. They're exciting. They're shiny. But when you go into an area that needs a level of reinvestment into it and you do it, the outcomes are so rewarding and so amazing. And I know it's going to take a few years for us to design and build these, but I think they're both going to be incredible projects that, 20 years from now, we're talking about when those communities saw that level of investment by the government.
And I know you've said several times that public engagement is super important and, how the Parks Department figures out what projects that you need to do next. And so I'm curious if you have like any advice or encouragement on how people can get their, have their voice heard. Is it through surveys or is there some sort of online forum that people can go to? Like how can the general public work with the county Parks and Rec Department to make sure that their needs are being heard?
It's really cool. So if you go to parkandrec.com and you look for the links on public input, all of the projects that are currently scheduled to begin work, which are funded projects, are put up there seeking community input once we start to develop those plans. So whether we're going in to do an update to a park or we're building a whole new park, there is an opportunity almost from day one to start to get that feedback brought into us. And then as a part of the process, that is taken into what we call schematic design, where we start to come up with rough ideas of what this project is going to look like. You start looking at elevations and landscaping and all that minutia, and you usually come up with some renderings or some site plans. Then 1, 2, or 3, sometimes 4, depending upon the complexity of the project, those get put back up. And we ask for more input on that. And then we go out into the community and we stage. And all of this is shared through our social media, on our website, and really through all the channels of communication that we have so that we encourage people in the community to come out. And I'll be honest with you, as frustrating as it is sometimes to go out and get feedback that is, hey, that's not what we wanted. We want this, this, and this. Sometimes it's an educational process where we say, no, I certainly understand that you want this, this, and this, but the property's too small. Or this is a neighborhood park where we're not really going to be able to put in a parking lot because if it's 2 or 3 acres, we can't take up that much of the green space in order to put in something that would take away from the stormwater requirements of the property. But we actually thrive for those conversations because if we just did things without community input, then there wouldn't be the opportunity for us to have a conversation about people's neighborhoods. Because at the end of the day, I may go in and put in a skate park in XYZ neighborhood park, and I may see that skate park a couple of dozen times. I may take my daughter there and she gets to play in it, but I don't live in that neighborhood. I don't live in that community. So the people who are most vested in seeing that come out right have the opportunity and the responsibility to provide their feedback. And I may not agree with it, but you're afforded the opportunity to participate in that conversation and at least understand how we got where we got. And more often than not, it's actually going to end up being a compromise of A and B, and both sides are going to be super excited because there's going to be new amenities in this community.
So it sounds like the first step to our listeners who want to get involved is to follow Mecklenburg County Park and Rec on social media.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
It is. And go to parkandrec.com, which will take you to the Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation website, where we got a lot of people who are working hard to put new content up there on a regular basis.
Well, I really just have one more burning question that I feel like I have to ask you as the parks director. How accurate is the NBC sitcom Park and Rec?
And like disturbingly, but it's not just about park and recreation. It is about what it is like to work in government in general, and the level of one of my absolute favorites. I have, and again, I hate that this is the medium of voice instead of visual, because otherwise you could see my Funko dolls of all the Parks and Rec cast. But like there is a line where there are people yelling at a community meeting about something. And one of my favorite Leslie Knope lines that a friend of mine who's now the deputy director in Memphis says is, they're just voicing their enthusiasm loudly and angrily. And I think it's so true, because it is. Community engagements do get heated. People come with so much passion and dedication because it's where they live. But at the end of the day, we are all working really hard to do this job because it's a fun job. It's a rewarding job. But yeah, the uncanniness of it is a mirror that I don't know that we're always super jazzed to look at because it's so real.
Awesome. Well, I think that sounds like a good place to end it. Nick, thank you so much for joining me today on the Charlotte Ledger podcast.
Again, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening. For more information on the Charlotte Ledger, visit our website at thecharlotteledger.com. This podcast episode was presented by Child Care Search, helping families find safe, quality childcare with free referrals and support every step of the way.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.